Welcome in, everyone, to Thursday night, and that means it's Swarm Talk, and it's time to give the preview and the prediction of what your Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets are going to be doing on Saturday. My name is Bryce Koon. Make sure you lock it in. If you're watching over on X, if you're watching on YouTube, head over to the YouTube channel. You can give us a follow over there on X at The Crowded Booth or my personal account at Bryce_Koon. But you can also subscribe to the YouTube channel, nearing 3K subs. We appreciate that. And we're going to talk tonight because this is a massive game in terms of, I think, just the culture and the character of this team. Look, you can look at the point spreads. You can look at different avenues to a upset win. And we're going to talk about what it would take to beat a very good Miami team. But I think that you're also going to learn, and you can learn things in losses if Georgia Tech does indeed lose this game, about where this team's mental stance is, about where this team's ability to power through just a lot of adversity that they've undergone and they've gone through so far this season. So we're going to talk about those things. We're going to look into the quarterback aspect of is it Haynes King? Is it Zach Pyron? Is it Aaron Philo? I know a lot of fans got excited because they got the little tease there of Haynes King being one of the captains for this game. Well, I'll give my thoughts on that. And then I'll round it out with a message to you, to the fans. I've been watching a lot of college football this year, been around the country watching college football, and it's homecoming. I know it's a noon kickoff, but I'm going to give my thoughts on just the buy-in, the attendance, and stuff like that. So without further ado, welcome to Swarm Talk. Let's lock it in. Let's talk college football, and let's talk Georgia Tech Miami right after this.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. Coming on The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.
Happy Thursday evening, everyone. Make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel if you have not already. Now, look, it's really easy for you to do it. You just hit the subscribe button down there. It costs you absolutely nothing. It just pops up on your YouTube page when you head over to the YouTube homepage when we post our latest content. And we are constantly posting stuff. And yes, we are going to have basketball content for Georgia Tech here on the YouTube channel. Thinking of cooking up just some quick post-game reaction shows, 10 to 15 minutes, giving my thoughts on kind of what happened in the basketball game. We'll take a look at that. You can find all the press conferences and interviews with players and coaches as well on the channel, so make sure that you hit that subscribe button. If you're a college football fan that's just coming over to the channel and hanging out, this is our Georgia Tech show, Swarm Talk. I used to cover the Jackets full-time. Now I cover the LSU Tigers, but we still keep this alive, and we've got good relationships, and we talk Georgia Tech every now and then here on the show. So we appreciate you. Thanks so much for watching here tonight. Georgia Tech Miami. Let's dive into what this game means. First off, top 5 team in the country, entering into your home stadium. It's a season for Georgia Tech that has been disappointing in the terms of the adversity you've had to face. Your starting quarterback, your most dynamic player, has been out. You can obviously never assume the results of a game, but I would say that you would probably say, yeah, you're going to lose to Notre Dame, but you probably would have beaten Virginia Tech. That would have this Tech team at 6-3, heading into their final 3 games, which I think preseason Georgia Tech fans would have said, hey, that's awesome. That looks really good. You've got 2 losses on your schedule that in Syracuse and Louisville, you probably wish you could go, play those games again. I agree there were some self-inflicted mistakes. I think both other teams also played, well in those games. Kyle McCord in Syracuse lit you up. It was like his highlight game of the year. So it's been a season for Georgia Tech up until this point where you're now entering into the back half. Your back's against the wall. And you're 5-4 with 3 games left, 2 against 2 top 5 programs. You got to get one to go to a bowl game. And it's very similar to what we saw last year in terms of getting to bowl eligibility. So I think that when you look at this team and what you have the opportunity to prove on Saturday night, or Saturday during the day. Apologies. I'm going to get to that later. It's obviously going to win a football game, right? Like, it's obviously you want to prove that you are more of what the exciting aspect of Georgia Tech has been rather than the disappointing for a lot of fans. But you also want to prove that you are taking a step out of the stellar/mediocrity of the ACC. I feel like there's a lot of teams, and Georgia Tech included, that when they get a shot in the ring with the elites of the conference, and I know the term elite, I'm using it relative to the ACC. Miami's one of the elite teams in the conference by those metrics. I'm not saying Miami's an elite team. I'm just telling you that they're one of the best teams in the ACC, and so by that they're in that elite tier 1 status of the ACC right now. But when these middle tier 2, tier 3 ACC teams get in the ring with the tier 1 squads, I really feel like it provides an opportunity. It presents an opportunity to turn around and showcase not just to the rest of the conference, not to the college football world, but to themselves, we're trending in the right way. And I would say the biggest way to talk about this team this year, I think it's just been a little bit frustrating at times. And I'm not saying it's solely on coaching, it's solely on players. It's just you've had the injury, you've been nicked up, you've been banged up. You had to play so many games in a row. You get into Ireland. You really, I feel like ever since that Ireland trip, you haven't really been able to catch your breath until you got to a bye week. So I strongly believe that when you get into this game, you're fresh off a bye week. You're healthier, I'll say that, than you were going in. But the opportunity presented to you is to, and I believe Brent Key will say this, it's not necessarily to the rest of the world. And I know they had the us against world type of viewpoint here, but I also believe that it is a chance to prove to yourself. There's a lot of guys on this roster that are going to be upperclassmen. Maybe they want to try to come back next year. And this game is a proving to yourself of like, okay, if you can go win this game, you could really get excited about what could happen next year. I'm not trying to look into 2025 yet, but this is a game that could set the tone for next season in terms of who comes back, in terms of what the expectations inside that building about this Georgia Tech team could be. So that's kind of my feeling and my vibe coming into this game. And we'll talk about it. I mean, we'll look at some of the numbers here. I'll say this. I've watched enough college football. I've been in enough college football games this year that I'm never going to count a team out. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there's absolutely 0.0% chance that Georgia Tech cannot or can win this game. I don't believe that. We've seen crazy things happen in college football. And I will tell you this. If there is a year in terms of parity and upsets and the craziness and the just wildness of college football that we're seeing, why not us? That's got to be the mentality. Like, yeah, they're number 4 coming. They're number top 5 team in the country coming in here. And, we've kind of been up and down. Our offense hasn't been as electric and, they looked really good. But why not? Who knows? Until you snap the ball, You don't know. And I think that's a really key point. I think you could learn early what type of game this is going to be. We'll get into that. But that's kind of my vibe, my feeling coming into that game as well. Shout out to Shannon Mize, a new member here on the YouTube channel. And hey, if you want to join Shannon and several others, it's a way to just get involved. You get your comments up first, and just a small percentage, small fee there for you, but it helps support our channel on a monthly basis. So Shannon, welcome to the YouTube channel. We really, really appreciate that. Alexandra says, "Hey, Bryce, love your takes. Keep up the great work." We appreciate that there as well. Dada Bob says, Haynes King needs to be able to play for us to have any shot. And Haynes King does need to be able to play in this game. And let's talk about it. The quarterback situation and the offensive woes. I was able to keep this banner from the last show that we did. Here's my thoughts on the quarterback situation. There's no doubt that the best chance to win this football game is with Haynes King at the helm. Like that take isn't going to surprise anybody. We're not clipping that for social, but Haynes King gives you the best chance to go win this football game. Hands down, bar none. It's not a knock on anybody else. He's your best player on your team. He is the most dynamic player on your team in terms of what he can do with his arm and with his legs, and he has toned down the interceptions. You like what you can see out of him. The question really becomes is, do you believe, and I'm talking to you at home, that the rhetoric coming out of Brent Key's mouth, he's going to be a captain? Is it coy? Is it gamesmanship? Or is he really going to play? And I'm just going to preface this with I'm going to give you some thoughts that I have on it, talking with people, in around that program, their thoughts on it. But what I'll tell you is, just from my experience, just my opinion, I've seen guys be named captain and come out in sweats and a jersey. So I would say this, him being named captain for this game doesn't definitively tell me that he's going to start the game for Georgia Tech. Could he? Yes. Could it end up being a sign that he was though all along? Sure. Yeah, it could be. But it doesn't put it in pen in terms of, well, he's the captain, he's going to play. There have been instances where guys come out as captains and they're, like I said, they're in the sweatpants and they got the jersey on. They're not dressed out. So in my opinion, we don't know. A lot of people don't know who is going to be under center on Saturday. So we know that Haynes King gives you the best shot. Now let's talk in a world where Haynes King is not playing. Well, let's talk in a world where he is. If he is, that's your best shot to win the football game. You have to hope that he's at least close to 100% healthy to where he can be his full self in terms of how dynamic he is on the ground and through the air. But we know what to expect. I mean, I think everyone has a good idea of what to expect when Haynes King is playing quarterback for this offense. We've seen it for so long now that it's going to be dynamic. You're going to be able to put up some points. Can you sustain drives? Can you not turn the ball over? Yada, yada, yada. Can you get it to your playmakers? We know that. The part that I think is the big question mark is, well, what if he can't go? So if Haynes King isn't playing on Saturday, you then enter into another conversation. Now we're going to call it how it is here. Zach Pyron struggled flat out at Virginia Tech. I think he would say, I think Winky would say, I think Faulkner would say that this is a situation where, hey, he didn't have a good game. And it's not an indictment on the kid. He just didn't play well. So do you go back to Zach Pyron after benching him and putting in true freshman Aaron Philo? Or did you spend the bye week getting Philo up to speed, preparing him to start? Now, you could look at that a couple different ways. I don't think Zach Pyron's a bad quarterback. Maybe the future versions of Zach Pyron, if he stays at Georgia Tech or goes somewhere else, whatever his career entails at the college level, obviously in hindsight, we'll have a better take on that. But with Zach Pyron kind of in this flux, I would say, where 3-4 weeks ago, everyone kind of said, okay, there's your backup quarterback. It's not a contest. This is the guy who's playing. Now, 3 weeks later, from the Notre Dame game on, it's kind of a question mark for a lot of people. So I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I think he had a bad day. And I think it was a nightmarish type of day. And things like that happen to college quarterbacks. They happen to the best of college quarterbacks. But I think what we have seen is that Pyron enters this game with the most experience in terms of, and once again, hypothetical situation we're talking, if you're joining in the middle of this, we're hypothetically talking about if Haynes King is not QB1 on Saturday. Pyron enters with the most experience, with Winky, obviously, and Faulkner as well. That has to play for something, and I believe that plays for Brent Key a little bit in terms of being in those situations. But the catch to it is, how quick would the trigger be if you start Zach Pyron? Because we're going to talk about Miami here in a second, and I don't think that this is a situation where you can allow yourself to dig a massive hole. If you start to see glimpses of what you saw against Virginia Tech, you would have to pull him very quickly. And I'll also add to this too, and this is not indicative of Pyron at all, but it's just kind of, a case study that we're seeing grow larger and larger across college football. If you pull a guy twice in a season, you then have to start wondering about his confidence level, his comfortability level, and then also his future with your program. I'm not trying to speculate. I'm just telling you, when you see across college football guys get pulled 2 times in a season, the confidence for a young guy like that is obviously going to be, down a little bit. He knows his ability. He's not performing where he wants to. But then you have to worry about his future of the program, because as the alternative here is, whether he starts in place of an injured Haynes King or not, Aaron Philo is another growing, interesting story. Now, I will caution you to this. 2 seasons ago, Zach Pyron entered. He had the grit, the determination. He was green in terms of experience. Georgia Tech's quarterback room had been abysmal, and he provided some stability, some fight, and some fire. That's one thing you're always going to get out of that kid. Regardless if he's playing well, he's going to be determined. He's going to have the fight. He's going to have the fire in his belly to go win you football games. And people fell in love with him. They fell in love with him. Now, I think part of that was due to, yes, he did play well down the stretch for you, but you also had a guy that just brought some sort of stability to a position that had been wandering in the wilderness for so long. And look, fan, the idea of, fan, it's a fanatic. You're going to be over emotional. The quarterback play at Virginia Tech had been so poor that when Philo came in and completed a pass, we saw that overreaction aspect. We saw falling in love with the backup. And look, the backup quarterback is oftentimes the most beloved player until they actually have to go into the game and they see, hey, everyone struggles. Nobody's perfect in terms of the fans' perspective. So is Aaron Philo the answer for this team in 2024? I don't think we can know that. And there's a lot of factors that come into this. I mean, look, Corey Robinson, one of your tackles for Georgia Tech, has been, per PFF, one of the best in the country. Miami's one of the best teams in the country in terms of pressure rate. They get to the quarterback and they disrupt things. Could you have a true freshman quarterback do that for you in week 10, week 11, I believe it is, week 11 of the college football season? I don't know. I think that's just part of what you're seeing with this team, is that you have to, you've got to have some sort of idea, and the fans are not going to, and it's because everything's kept so close to the vest at Georgia Tech, and that we've talked ad nauseum about why, and the reason being, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's just how they decide to do things. But this staff has to be so sure with whatever decision they're going to go with. And that's why I've painted this picture. If it's Haynes King, well, you're not worried about it. Yeah, he might only be 80, 90% from what we've been told. The injury, and from what I've been told, is a lot of pain tolerance. In terms of pain tolerance / effectiveness with this injury, how can he move with the ball? How can he move in terms of in and around the pocket? What is his comfortability level in terms of pain tolerance? And then how effective can he be with this injury? So if he's playing, we're not even there's no point in having this conversation. But I think where we kind of sit with this is that nobody knows, and it begs the question of who's the better option, Zach Pyron or Aaron Philo? And I'll just give my take on it. Like, the staff has to know that if you put in Zach Pyron on Saturday and you take him out halfway through the first quarter, halfway through the second quarter, the effects that's going to have on somebody. you really because you can't play a game of taking a guy out and going back to him and having this quarterback carousel where you have a guy just getting on and off the ride constantly. Quarterback is such a mentally demanding position that really does things to players. And remember, look, I know people talk about, well, they get paid so we can talk bad about them, but here's my take on it. Like, you still have to remember this is 18 to 23-year-old kids. Elsewhere, we're looking at you, Alan Bowman at Oklahoma State, older. So when you're yanking them in and out, it messes with the flow, it messes with the rhythm. So if Zach Pyron's the starter in this game, the question then becomes for me, like I said earlier, is how long is the leash? How long are you going to go with him as your starting quarterback? I think Pyron has a great arm. I think it's completely down to decision making and in between the ears. Yes, we know that he is not as in terms of flashy in how mobile he is as Haynes King or Aaron Philo to a certain extent, but the guy can run. He's big. He's physical. He can play the position. Is Pyron the starting quarterback on Saturday? I don't know. I mean, I've talked to certain people that say there's not a chance in the world that he starts this game on Saturday. I'm just letting you know that. I don't know how much I'm going to take stock in those statements because I think there is an argument for him starting this game. Aaron Philo is such an unknown in terms of what you have. People are acting like they know what they have. I think you've got a gamer. I think you have a guy that plays more to the style of Haynes King. So, yes, there's some parallels that you could run with that, but you can't expect Aaron Philo to come in and save the team. And that gets me on a second point. We talk offensive woes here. At some point, and I get it, the quarterback position is beyond imperative that you have it figured out. There's programs across the country that still don't have it figured out. This team has to be better offensively to help whoever it is. That's the root theme, the common theme that for me continues to show up about Georgia Tech's offense. They've got players, they don't have a great offense. They've got guys that shine, but it's not in terms of a gelling group, in terms of coming all together and being borderline elite. Like a lot of people in the preseason just assumed they would make another jump. It's not there yet. So when you're looking at the recipe for an upset here, this offense has to be better around whoever is under center. Jamal Haynes, Chad Alexander, you hope obviously those guys are. I'll say this. I just wish the ACC would do a mandated injury report like the SEC has done this year. It is the greatest thing in the world, whether you believe people are taking it seriously or not. It gives people some type of idea of what's going on. The running back room can't just be Jamal Haynes. You are going to run that kid into the ground, especially if you don't have Haynes King at quarterback. The wide receiver room. Look, I love what we're seeing out of Eric Singleton and Malik Rutherford. You got to have somebody else emerge. You know, you can't have drops. You can't have route running miscommunication. I think this offensive line's pretty good. This is one of the more difficult tasks of the season. So this offense as a whole has to play well, and that needs to be talked about more than the casual take of, well, we don't have our quarterback, so we're not going to win. Okay, yeah, but the making and the marking of stepping up in development of a team is that you are growing around said quarterback. We haven't really seen that out of this group. They're struggling big time with it. And at times, yeah, the quarterback play has been less than desirable, but I don't think you're losing games solely just off the quarterback position. So that's where I sit with that. That's where I sit with the quarterback situation and offensive woes. You have to score. You have to be a factor. You have to be a threat. Miami, and I wanted to read this out here. Miami has been very interesting in terms of their stats and what they've been able to do. They have given up, and let's go back here for this right here. Where'd it go, Bryce? See, you have your notes, and then it goes somewhere, wherever it is. Okay. Georgia Tech put up 41 points against a North Carolina defense that didn't play very well. They've struggled to score, but they've played above average defenses in Notre Dame and Virginia Tech their last 2 games. My take on this is that Miami has only allowed 22.6 points per game this season, but I believe that number is a little misleading because it's carried heavily on the first 4 games. Their first 4 opponents, they allowed an average of 10.3. Since then, 4 out of the last 5 teams that they have played have scored at least 31 points. If you hit the 31 to 38, let's just call it an average. If you hit 35 points in this game, you feel like you could have a shot. Now, we obviously saw what Duke ran into, and that is the other side of the football, and we talk about that right now, that, let's talk about it. How to slow down Miami. I will tell you this right now. I do not believe Georgia Tech stops Miami defensively because I don't know if there's a lot of teams in the country that can stop Miami with what they do. Cam Ward is a very good quarterback. There's a reason that he's top 3, top 4 in the Heisman race per betting odds. There's a reason that Xavier Restrepo is getting even more praise. There's a reason that this running game is very, very dynamic. They are a good offense. It would be a massive task, and I want you to pay attention to this when you look at this on Saturday. It would be a massive task to just say, well, they're going to go out there and stop them. Okay, yeah. I mean, and if they don't, then I'm going to be pissed off. Like, let's not have a black and white view here. This is a really good offense. You've got to find ways to create turnovers. Georgia Tech has not been very good in that department this year, and make Cam Ward break a sweat. Like, that's really what it comes down to. You have to make him break a sweat. You have to make him feel some pressure. Miami's been good at doing that this season. Defensively, you look at Ward, he's completing 67% of his throws. He's putting up, he's got a 175.1 passer rating. With Georgia Tech's inability to get after the quarterback, it does project to be a long day for Georgia Tech's secondary. I like the secondary, but you can't ask these guys to cover for the amount of time that Miami has forced teams in the past to cover for, if that makes sense. You've got to force short, quick routes. You cannot let explosive plays. All the yada, yada, yada that you hear about with this team. Now, the defense is, in my opinion, going to have to play very well through the first 3 quarters. Miami's a team that has been labeled as a fourth quarter team. They've scored more points in the fourth quarter than they have at all this entire season. And when you look at what they do well late in games, it places a larger emphasis on starting fast defensively, hoping that Miami shoots themselves in the foot a couple of times early in the game, and establishing yourself as a defense, like I said, early on in this ball game. If you can do that and limit the amount of times they get into the end zone early on, with what we talked about offensively, you have a chance to win this game. That is the path to an upset. But a lot of things are going to have to flip that we haven't seen happen this year. You're going to have to get legitimate pressure on the quarterback. Your front 7 is going to have to be disruptive. They can't just be group guys that stay in their lanes and playing patty cake. No, these guys have to get disruptive. They've got to get into the backfield. They've got to cause confusion. Like I said, they've got to make Cam Ward break a sweat. Here's another aspect of this that is just it's crazy. And Brent Key talked about this week. Cam Ward's ability to keep drives alive. Folks, Cam Ward is 71% on his throws on third down. That's a reason. The guy, he's dependable. He's clutch. He's coming in those moments. Brent Key talked about this today or this week. He said, I think in the Duke game, he had 11 scrambles. 2 of those 11 he converted for touchdowns. We have to be disciplined. We've got to be sure tacklers. He breaks a lot of tackles in those scrambles. He goes left, goes right, back left, pops it up the middle. Some of the scrambles are 8, 9, 10 seconds. Clayton Powell-Lee added to that conversation. He said, it's honestly crazy what he can do when he tries to extend plays. So we've been harping on anytime you see him out of the pocket, find the nearest guy and make sure he doesn't have those windows where he can just throw and make a huge play. That's been the biggest thing for us as a secondary. And this is just so intriguing. His ability to extend plays, your linebacker play has to be very, very good. Like, your linebacker play has to be really good in this football game. but your secondary has to stay so disciplined because you will give up the 4 or 5 yard carry to Cam Ward. What you can't give up is coming up to try to get Ward, and he finds Xavier Restrepo, and it turns into a broken play and a 65-yard touchdown or a big 43-yard gain. That's what you can't have happen. If that happening, it leads to what I'll call as the Miami snowball effect. Oxymoron, completely understand, but the Miami snowball effect. When they get going offensively and that group gets really moving, that's when it's really hard to slow things down and grab a hold of the rope once again. That's another statement I want to make about this game is defensively, you can't let go of the rope and you can't let them get a majority of the rope. Miami's offense is really dynamic. You can take a look. I mean, you can go look at the numbers. Xavier Restrepo has been very, very good this season. He's got 51 catches, 9 touchdowns for 856 yards. Damian Martinez and Mark Fletcher Jr. have run for over 1,000 yards and 14 touchdowns. Miami has averaged more than 126 yards in every single game on the ground. They're averaging 5.5 yards a carry. I mean, guys, they're balanced. They're just balanced in what they do. This is a very good offense. And that for me is just a major concern. Can Georgia Tech take one of the things away, make them one-dimensional? It's a tall task. I mean, it is what it is. We're going to keep it real here. I don't know if it's going to happen, but that's the path to an upset. So I like what Hal said here. He said, score 30-plus and get 2 turnovers to have a shot. Agreed. No, 110% Hal. 110% Hal. TD Jake says, if we make average QBs look like Heisman's every week for the last decade, we're going to make actual Heisman look like Jesus himself. Flood Insurance Guru says Tech has a better chance of being in Georgia than I do Miami. I would agree with that. All right, let's go to the last part of this. I want to talk about the environment in the crowd. You know, I've been really kind of vocal about this. And, you know, ever since I made the switch to covering a different team for my day job, we'll say. Yes, it's a completely different tier of program in terms of tradition, in terms of pageantry, and you know, it would be ridiculous, and I would need to be called an SEC homer if I tried to sit here and tell you that Georgia Tech needs to have some type of environment like they're going to have at Death Valley on Saturday night. I mean, for God's sake, they're going to have Paul Skeens and Livy Dunn in the building. They're going to bring a Tiger onto the field. It's going to be crazy for LSU Alabama. I'm not going to even try to compare the two, and I'm not going to do that. That's dumb. It's nearsighted. Georgia Tech isn't that, and that's fine. Shout out to the Georgia Tech students. You know, it was very tough there for a decent amount of time, and I've talked with people who were in school during the bad years, and you know, it's one of those things where it does deflate you as a student who wants to go to football games. The student section at Georgia Tech understands the assignment. Look, I would just put it like that. Like, they understand what's being asked of them. I think that the next breakthrough for this group is you can't have every single excuse in the book. Well, majority of our fan base doesn't live here. Well, you know, people just, you know, they don't care, and which is true. A lot of donors, they don't really love football. Well, you know, there's other things to do in Atlanta. Fellas, folks, guys and gals, I don't care. I don't care that your fan base is spread out. There's a lot of schools that have spread out fan bases. But those people, these fans, they revolve their entire fall schedule around the 6 to 7 home games they get a year. Yeah, it's disappointing that it's disappointing that Georgia Tech is not getting to play this game at least in the afternoon slot. It's disappointing that it's going to be a 12 p.m. kick. It's disappointing that Big Boy is going to be performing, right after, Saturday brunch. But at some point, the buck has to stop with excuses. At some point, we can't just keep saying, well, it's just there's other things to do, and it's hard. It's just not is. I mean, yeah, winning helps, but I see a lot of talk about, well, when they win. Well, that's completely, I mean, that's idiotic in my opinion. That's completely asinine. If the idea is, well, when they get good, we'll show up, well, then you're not a real fan to begin with, are you? And look, I've met some fans of Georgia Tech, some absolute diehards. There's a group of diehard fans that cannot stand what we do, but I applaud those people because they show up, win or lose, every single week. So hats off to them. But you're not going to win or lose this game because the game's at noon. You're going to win or lose the game because you didn't play well or they played better than you. But from an environment standpoint, man, it's homecoming. Like, I'm so tired of hearing these built-in excuses about this program not being where they want to be. Go do it. If you want to be better, go win. If you and that's a charge to the program, but this is one for the fans. Make this. There's fans that do this, and I don't want to paint the picture that people don't do it, but the scale is wild to me. In terms of, and it's every excuse in the book. I mean, it's every single one of them in the book that, well, we don't have a large fan base. We don't have this. I mean, bottom line, show up to the games. I'm not saying you're a bad fan if you live 800 miles away. And I'm not saying, but I'm saying is you can't use that as an excuse when there's fans of other schools that travel each Saturday to go watch their team play and they live a far away. They make it revolve around that's their fault. Show up to the game. Support these guys. It's going to be very disappointing to look up in the stands and see 38,000 people. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And Clayton says this right now. No matter how bad they are, playing in Blacksburg is tough. We need to become that. It's time for the excuses to stop. Provide an environment that they want to go play in. Provide an environment. You can't keep being mad about recruiting. You can't keep being mad about certain things. Like, you want to straight up know why you had 3 offensive linemen go take a visit to South Carolina and people can't wrap their head around why they would even want to go to South Carolina? Yes, South Carolina is a middle to low tier SEC team year in, year out. The environment. People are so quick to say, and you know what? I don't often pull this card. I'm going to, because this is what I do for a living. I talk to these kids for a living. You can sit there and say, well, it's just the money. It's just the money. That's all they care about. No, not every single kid leaves your school because of money. Does it play a factor? Sure. Large or small. That's for the kid to know. And if it comes public, we know. But environment matters. And you've got an impressive list of recruits coming this weekend. They're going to look up in the stands, and they're going to wonder when there's a top 5 team in the country, and your team is looking for a bowl game and a massive upset, why there's only 36,000 people in the stands. It's that kind of stuff, man. It matters. It matters. When kids look up in the stands and they see, and Georgia Tech will never be the place that has 100K people rocking. I'm not asking for that. Hear me out when I say that. What I'm asking for it is show up, be loud, be rowdy. This is college football. This isn't a golf match. Have fun. Shout out to the student section because they figured it out. Bryce, how do you know? On the field for the Georgia Tech-Georgia State game, an ACC versus Sun Belt matchup, students were rocking when we were on the field. You can ask myself, Will, and Ralph. We're on the field right next to Georgia Tech's tunnel as they leave the field to come back on for the start of the game. They're getting off the field for warm-ups, and that student section is rocking. Elsewhere, man, it's like Derby Day. So it can't just be in the good moments. So challenge the fan base, show up, be loud. That's really kind of what I got to say about that. George P. Burdell says, I live in Columbia. Williams-Brice is a great environment, at least for the first quarter, unless they're in it with a big team, then the fans stick around. Yeah, it's one of the best in the country. So nobody's asking for this place to sell out week in, week out. That's a process. But by God, make it a rowdy atmosphere. Bobby Dodd can be awesome. Even at noon. You can't just use it. Well, we're not going now. What does that mean? It's college football. You get 6 to 7 of these a year at home. Go to the dang football game. Cheer on your team that's 10 times better than they were 2 years ago. Stop complaining about everything. And just win or lose. This team has a lot to prove. So that's where I sit with it. That's where I sit with it. Clayton says he will give it all. There you go. Hey, we appreciate you for tuning in. Georgia Tech, Miami. I do think Miami wins this game. The last point I will make here is, though, Clayton, yes, I was there. South Carolina was pretty rowdy when they were played LSU 12. You know what the excuse to that is, Clayton? Well, College Game Day was there. Well, I mean, by God, I mean, you're never going to get College Game Day if you don't think they look at environments? GT Faithful says the crowd involvement issue is not going to be overnight fixed. Feel like there's been an uptick since we started taking football seriously. I believe that big reason we chose Key to be head coach. Yeah, to a certain extent, it doesn't matter who the head coach is. You win, but you can't just have the attitude of, well, when we win, we'll show up. That's lazy. That's lazy. Okay, I picked Miami to win this game, but I will say this. You're going to learn a lot about the true toughness of this team in this game. You're going to learn a lot about if it's for show or if it's for real. Is the lunch pail mentality real or is it a mirage? Is the culture that Key has had 2 years to build now real or is it surface level? You're going to learn about that. If this team, I will say this, the only massive disappointing result, in my opinion, will be is if you get the doors blown off of you. You remember when Ole Miss came to town a couple years ago? If that type of game happens, I don't care how good. If they treat you like you are a group of 5 team, Sunday night's show will be interesting. I'll say that. All right, we appreciate you tuning in. Went a little long night, but hey, look at that. Over 400 people watching live here on the channel. Make sure that you are on all the platforms. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you're watching over on X, follow us on social media. Head over to @TheCrowded_Booth. We're talking college football all the time. We got great content coming each and every single day. We're reviving that Inside the Booth series where we've talked a couple Auburn commits, a recent A&M commit, and obviously Georgia Tech commits will be there as well. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a lot of fun. College football. Enjoy your Week 11. I will. I know you will. We'll be back Sunday night to talk about this game, 7:30 Central sharp. We'll see you then. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time here on Swarm Talk, brought to you by the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth.